Haha, sweet. All right, the doors are open. It looks like we've got some attendees walking in, virtually that is. We'll give them a couple more minutes to get us in the room here, and then we'll hand it over to Rob.
Let them find their seats.
Right on, they're starting to show up here. Thanks for joining, folks. One more minute until we release Rob to the crew that's joining us here. Thanks for joining, folks. We'll get started here in just a sec as our attendees are virtually walking from one room into another. Okay, right at the bottom of the hour, and I'm going to get started with introductions here. I would like to introduce my friend Rob here from Tintri by DDN. Rob is somebody that we've been working with for quite some time. I don't know, we've done, man, how many reference architectures. It's been great doing those with you. And if you've ever been to VMworld, you probably caught this guy sporting a pretty killer mohawk. You can't miss him. Hopefully we'll get the same this year, but we'll see. Rob, thank you and Tintri for sponsoring our event today. It's been a pleasure having you guys. I'm going to give you the next 15 minutes to present your solution and talk about bottleneck visualization, something very near and dear to our heart and performance. So I'll hand it over to you. Thanks again, buddy.
Awesome. Thanks, Blair. Thanks, everyone, for attending. So I've got 15 minutes, and I want to show you a lot of stuff, and I don't want it to be all PowerPoint. So I'm going to jump into some demos. I'm going to hope the demo gods are with me. And I'm going to go kind of especially fast because this is being recorded, so you can catch the recording after or just catch us in the booth after. Anyway, so this session's on bottleneck visualization. And I would say that your VDI performance objective is to move your bottleneck, and ultimately you want to make your end user your bottleneck. And what do I mean by that? If you're so when Blair and I were talking, he said, "Hey Rob, you know, what should you do a session on?" I'm like, "Well, we do a great job at identifying the bottleneck. I should do that." Yeah, okay. I mean, of course, it's a storage company. You're always going to point that out. And I said, "No, I don't see the bottleneck being storage most of the time. Most of the time, I see it being CPU and memory." And I guess that gives me a different perspective of it because I see, you know, once you move the bottleneck and you get ample storage underneath it, then your bottleneck is somewhere else. And ultimately, you want to move that all the way through your stack so that the actual demand for work can't keep up with the supply that you've supplied for it. And those would be your end users. So as you know, get them really engaged. They're typing as fast as they can, but they're not going to be able to have performance issues in your system. So really brief primer on Tintri. We're storage built from the ground up for virtualization, and essentially what we've got is in the past you had storage, and storage was directly attached to your servers, and then you had it centralized, and then you'd cut your storage out, and you would optimize it for every workload, and that worked out pretty good. A bit of tuning, but I mean there wasn't tons and tons of workloads like there is today. Q virtualization 10, 15 years ago, and things changed quite a bit. So now what we see is everything's coming in as an aggregate, and it's coming in what we call the I/O blender. So you've got a bunch of small block, large block, all kind of coming in, and from a storage perspective, it's just serving offsets. It thinks it's doing a great job, and the VMs don't think it's doing a great job, and they see latency that the storage can't seem to report. So enter Tintri. What we've done, is we've made the simplest storage solution. It's just a nice big bucket, throw all your VMs in it, and we'll do all that separation for you. So we do a lane per VM. And when you're talking about something like VDI, this is especially helpful because we can visualize all of it right down as if you cut an individual LUN for every single one of them. And we can do it in thousands on a single VM store, which is the name of our appliance, all the way up into, Tintri Global Center will see a view of 64 of these in one shot. So tens of thousands, single pane of glass. So these are just the lanes that I was talking about. And what this does is isolates workloads and gives very predictable performance. And what do we do for visibility? Well, what we do is we break down the latency the way that the guest itself would see it. And so that is a combination of host, network, and storage. So it's that end-to-end storage path. And what you would typically see in the application is just, oh, it's slow storage. And you talk to someone and say, oh, yeah. And then the finger pointing game begins. And what we've done is we've come up with a way to really simplify that. We know when a VM asks for something, we know it was delivered, and we can do all the math on everything in between. So here's a login VSI graph. And this is a few years ago. Again, we've been working with login VSI for a long time, over 5 years myself personally. And this is watching those login VSI tests run. And what happens is you start to hit this curve, and all of a sudden it goes into the realm of unacceptable. And when you're into this realm of unacceptable, there's not clear guidance on what that might be. Now, Blair's going to go through this later in his session, which is your VDI tuning stack. And this is going to be all the areas that can screw you up. So if you get one of these right, it doesn't mean it's a free pass and everything's going to work right. But you get any one of these wrong, and it's a guaranteed you're going to have some pain. So how can Tintri help with all of this? Well, again, here's that graph that I showed you. And here is a screenshot from our UI that was actually running one of those loads. And what you can see is that the curve kind of matches it. So if you're not familiar with our interface, that top line on the VM store are the IOs that are going through right now, number of IOPS. That purple haze you see there is normalized. So it's sort of my apples to apples meter, so that it's normalized to an 8K block size. It kind of helps. It's kind of a mix between a throughput and IOPS graph. And down below is latency. And the latency subdivided between host, network, and storage. And then on storage side, we subdivided even further. Now, in this case, we can see this is host latency. So this is somewhere from the inside the guest, getting outside the guest, outside your Windows box, into your hypervisor, in through the kernel, making its way through all the other stuff that's in there, and then finally hitting that network card. And once it hits that network card and goes onto the network, that's the network latency. And then once it hits us, then it's on us for the storage side of things. Now, here's a little video. I am going to do live demos, but just in case the demo gods aren't with me, I've got a little backup here. And I've just saved you 48 minutes because that's how long this took to run. So on the right side, we see 10-second averages coming out, and we can see the load is increasing. So a login VSI run is going. I believe that desktops are being logged on every 2.5 seconds, right up to 1,500 desktops in this case. And what you can see in the bottom line is that latency was great. Not much, not much. And then things got a little hotter, and the green that creeped in, that green is host latency. So this is where Blair says, no, it's always a storage thing. I say, no, I see it being host. I guess it depends if you have it sized right. Now, if I put too many VMs on here, then we're going to see, we're definitely going to see some contention latency on the storage side, which that purple spike is right there. And what's really cool about our graphs is that we can dig in and find out exactly who did what when we want to. So let me jump over live to that. And what I should have here is a login VSI run going in the background. I've got 123, 124 out of 500 sessions logged on. I just started this 12 minutes ago. It was a little scramble to start it right before the session here. And on the Tintri side of things, what we can see is our main dashboard. We can see the real-time IOPS that are going through. Now, I'm not a big fan of IOPS, even though I work for a storage company. I would say that we're more of a data management company. We're all about the virtualization. So these IOPS are kind of useless. I usually say they're like RPMs in a car. I told you I was going 5,000 RPM. Without telling you what gear it's in, it's not helpful. Hold on one sec to just catch some of these if I can before they time out. Tough thing with demos in a short amount of time. All right, good. So we've got some loads in the background. Login BSI is running. We can see that this user's doing their email. Another user's doing some might be doing Word, might be browsing the internet. This one's looking up BBC, and all of this is going on. And this is how our VM store is responding to it. And I can click in and look at throughput. I can look at the IOPS. I can look at the latency. Like I pointed out, I can get that breakdown. So this is a one-day view right now. So you can see me burning the midnight oil all through last night, getting this set up for you guys. And here we can see our reads and writes. And then we can see the latency along the way. And so in these big boot storms, my biggest bottleneck here is network latency. So the average isn't all that bad. It's 1.7 milliseconds. And the worst offenders are in the 4 milliseconds range per VM. So that's really not too bad at all. We can look as I got it heated up with even bigger loads. And these ones are going up into the 37, 35 millisecond range. But again, is that storage? Some of it is storage, 0.8 milliseconds, but it's primarily network and host. Now, what I can do is go and take a look at all my VMs right now live, running in here, and I can sort by any of countless columns we have. And I'm sorting by latency to find who's the worst offenders here. And so this is what I love about Tintri. I used to be a customer of Tintri back early 2012. I've been on board with Tintri since early 2014, so over 5 years. And this is where we break it down, host, network, storage, on a per VM basis. And if that's not enough, then we can go right down to the vDisks. And every single vDisk has these counters. And these counters go back as far as 7 days inside of the VM store. They go back 30 days inside Global Center. And in our analytics, which is a SaaS platform that leverages Autosport data, we go back and show you 3 years. So I do want to hopefully show you that really briefly, because I think that our analytics from a VDI perspective is incredibly exciting, because we can take something that is normally a big mash of thousands of things happening and really distill it down and show you what's happening for each one of them. So again, we can see that primarily our bottleneck on this is network. And if I were to go and figure out what this would be, I'd probably add a field for host, because I want to know what physical host they're on. And they're mixed on a bunch of hosts here. So maybe it's not one host. Now, unfortunately, these are IPs that were just configured instead of fully qualified names. If they were fully qualified names, you'd see the names of these hosts would be HQ, TM, C1, BL6. So this is chassis 1, blade 6. And you would end up determining that all of these are sharing the same Cisco UCS blade chassis, and they're oversubscribing the FEXs on the back, and that's why we're getting network latency. So on the surface, storage is slow, users are complaining, or maybe not at this rate. These are pretty nice latencies. We can get in if they do complain. We can see what it looked like historically, and we don't have to do anything special at all. We just gotta point at our vCenter, give it credentials, and we're good to go. So very conscious of time here. Analytics, so like I mentioned, 3 years going back. So we've got a great planning tool in here. We've introduced CPU and memory as well, even though it's not a storage thing. It is, I think, helpful to customers to see things the way that we put it. And I think that our approach is incredibly simple. You do not need to know anything about storage to operate this. It's NFS. You put it in. It's a little 2U appliance. Totally self-contained. It's completely HA, dual controller. It's got all the bells and whistles, completely built enterprise grade and built for very large enterprise. We've got some very massive VDI deployments out with our customers. And you know, they're very pleased with our offerings. So here's on the analytics side. And again, it's just going to be a big cliffhanger at the end because I don't have the time to get into this. I could easily spend a day or two just on this graph probably. So let's just take a look at performance, space, working set. We're looking back 3 years here. This environment stopped. It paused back in end of October when we did a lab move. And if I wanted to click in at any point in time to see what's going on from a performance or space perspective, what this is a snapshot view on the day I clicked on, which was July 27th. And it shows us that out of our almost 3,000 VMs, we've got almost 2,000 were sitting there idle, not very helpful. We've got a number of them sitting in this range here. There's 345 in this range and 577 in this range. And if I click in, I can see what they are. And these ones happen to be View desktops. So I came in focused on a time where I remember doing some VDI work leading up to VMworld. And so here we've got you know, some of these login VSI tests running, and those stood right out on the performance timeline. If I were to change some of this around, logarithmic, and you know, what this ends up showing you are things like, you know, these outliers on the far right. These are the ones that'll come up and creep into you. And if you've got VDI, you may end up having some, you know, you may end up with something inside there. Someone's running some SQL inside or whatever it might be. We're gonna really bring that to light, make it easy to find. We support more than just VDI, so all the workloads, you know, throw your Oracle and Exchange and SQL, everything. The only caveat is we only support virtual workloads. So we've built an amazing file system from the ground up to support virtualization. It's always support, but inside virtualization, there's a ton of generalized apps and specialized apps. So I want to thank you very much for your time today. We'll be in the booth if you have any questions. We've got resources you can grab, white papers that are a lot more detailed than I could go through in 15 minutes. And I just want to thank you. And it looks like Mark is about to give me the hook anyway.
Yes, I was about to do that. No, I wanted to thank you very much, Rob. It's been a pleasure having you here. Go to the booth also to have a chance to win the $100 Amazon gift card in the raffle. With that, I'm closing out this meeting. You can go back to the auditorium where Mr. Blair Parkhill will be doing his session on the expert's guide to VDI performance tuning. What else? Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone.